She sheltered a wounded Apache from the posse. By sunrise, his riders ringed her cabin. Bright noon laid a white sheet over the valley, heat shimmered off the hardpan. A hawk wrote circles above the cottonwoods. Maren Vale stepped from her well with a yoke creaking on her shoulders, lips dust-dry, eyes narrowed against the glare. Then a body rolled from the brush and hit the wheel ruts with a sound that snapped every nerve into alert. A young rider sprawled on the road, skin coppered by sun hair in 2 braids, rope cut into one wrist, blood had glued his shirt to one thigh, breath soared shallow and uneven. A posse thundered somewhere downstream. Gunmetal jingled, leather rasped, hooves drummed out a search rhythm. Maren dropped the bucket, seized a pitchfork, snatched a flour sack from the porch rail, jammed the pole into the wagon track and hung the white cloth square across the trail like a bar. To slow men who trusted speed more than caution, that was the anchor. A visible stop sign for dust wildness, and the law pressed too hard. She crouched by the stranger, poured the first dipper over his lips. A tremor passed through his jaw, a word formed, no English, no Spanish. A prayer, maybe a name. Maren hooked her hands under his shoulders and dragged him toward the hay sledge parked by the fence, grit carved lines into her palms. The limp weight slid across the ground with a rasping hush. She hauled the canvas off a bundle of fence posts, rolled him onto the boards and pulled the cover back over his chest. A rifle crack jumped the air near the arroyo. The posse surged into view, faces banded against dust eyes, hungry for a chase. Deputy Orton Pike rode front saddle, scarred from years on the trail. Mouth hard as iron tools, he hauled in the reins at the flour sack. Tilted his hat, then studied the woman standing square in his path. Maren Vale, you seen a runner pass this way? The tide of riders spread around her yard like an incoming sea. Maren kept her inhale thin and level. A runner passed earlier. A deer, she said, voice steady. The deputy's gaze slid to the sledge, to the canvas, to the well. A bead of water ticked into the trough. The hawk's shadow crossed the yard. You move that cloth, ma'am. We got law business. Maren lifted the yoke again, forced a small domestic rhythm into shaking muscles. Washing day, deputy. I'll pull it aside once you ride through. Pike nudged forward, boot, bumped the cloth. The horse snorted. Another rider craned for a view toward the barn. Maren stepped exactly where the angle covered the sledge. A drizzle of water brightened the dust at her toes. Clean, bright, safe images. No threat on the frame, danger implied. Not shown a neighbor boy among the riders, called that Apache. Cut 2 drovers near San Miguel, meant to hang him. Soon as we catch the trail, Maren watched the hawk slice low along the fence line. She held the deputy's stare. The road remains public, Pike. He grunted, spat brown into the white glare, then jerked his chin. Keep a door barred today, Miss Vale. Some men lose judgment when blood stains their boots. The posse rolled on, kicking up grit. The flour sack flapped twice, then settled. Maren waited until the last hoofbeat dissolved, then collapsed to one knee, palms on the ground. Breath counting the seconds before sound returned, she threw back the canvas, lifted the stranger's head. The good pulse beat, but weak eyes unfocused. The thigh wound looked deep, yet clean enough for pressure without steelwork. She dragged the sledge across packed earth grooves, stuttered toward the cellar hatch, set behind the stovepipe. The handle lifted with a wood groan. Cool air smelled of potatoes, candle wax. Quiet down there gave room for a secret. Maren eased the man along the stairs, paneled him onto a bunk built from fruit crates, slid a water crock nearby, lit a small kerosene lamp, set the flame. Low, soft gold painted his cheekbones. Bones of a fighter, not yet a veteran. She cut away the torn shirt, rinsed with boiled water, pressed clean linen around the thigh, then laced a tourniquet with a strip torn from her apron. The stranger watched without flinch while sweat broke along the hairline eyes. Never quite losing their guard, Maren spoke lightly as if to a skittish colt name. He breathed something like Tajon. The syllables rode the air, rough yet steady. The voice carried no plea, only clarity. Maren repeated it once to fix it inside memory. Tajon. The rider did not nod, but the breath deep and fine that keeps a distance. She thought people with names pull the heart forward. Compassion helps work hands, but it also opens doors that cannot be closed. She finished binding the leg-dabbed whiskey along shallow cuts over ribs. A hiss went through clenched teeth. The lamp made honey lines on muscle and on the weave of canvas clean details period. True wool blanket, cotton shirt. Rawhide thong around his neck, a bead carved from bone. Nothing modern, nothing loud above their heads. The yard stood empty. Sun bounced off the tin basin, dust motes hovered like seeds. Marin climbed up, slid the hatch shut, set the stove back on its iron ring, pushed the table over the panel for weight, drew breath through a cloth so the shake would not win chores, followed in a near-silent line to steady the pulse. She set dough to rise. She refilled the trough from the well. Brought in kindling. She spoke to no one. The hawk vanished toward the hills. A cloud banked high above the far ridge, blue on white like folded cloth. Heat held, yet the hour leaned toward relief. Marin measured time by small jobs, and by the sound of the wounded man below. Each pause, counted each return, told her. The life refused to fade. A trickle of calm entered her spine. Evening arrived bright, not dim. The valley light softened into warm gold, safe for older eyes, nothing dark or murky. She carried down broth in a tin cup. Tejon lifted head fingers, steady though slow. Both hands accepted the tin without a rush, a small courtesy old as the ground. When the cup returned empty, Marin heard her own hunger answer. Yet work stayed first. Linen changed again. Salve spread on the edges, a clean wrap pulled gentle then firm. The rider watched her move. Not hostile, not grateful exactly. Something else measuring whether this place could carry trust. Marin spoke about the well, about a mare that chewed through the rope 2 winters back, about a brother somewhere in Kansas who wrote only when crops failed. None of it asked for an answer, but the words filled space between risk and choice. A coyote sounded far off. Not a threat, only a line in a larger song. She banked the lamp to the smallest safe wick, left a second tin of water near his hand. Closed the hatch, climbed to the porch and sat with her rifle laid crosswise in the rocking chair. A book never got read by anyone on a day like this. Yet the pages steadied. The table cleared, the well rope rewound, chores became a drum. But the thought pressed that the posse might return once dust cooled to moonlight. Those men hunted trophies, not justice. The fear poised like a nail above the skin held ready. Not driven, her guard never left. Midnight rolled over the land. Crisp starlight pricked the sky without cloud far away. A thunderhead flickered with heat, lightning, no sound, just silver flash. The cellar stayed quiet, save for slow breath. Marin dozed in the chair, woke at each coyote yip. Then slept again till birds wrote light into the east. Dawn arrived, bright, clean, legible. The cabin windows burned briefly with that early blaze. Marin walked the yard, touched the fence, checked the trough, let the mare nose her elbow. The world seemed manageable. Then the new sound began, a many-hoof rhythm low. Not hurrying, not careless horses approached in a deliberate tide. Marin stood on the step and counted as shadows came off the ridge one after another. Riders spread in a slow, wide circle around the homestead, fresh paint on faces, eagle feathers bound into braids, rifles slung low, tomahawks sheathed, no weapon, raised no shout, given a silence like a held breath printed itself on the yard. The light made every detail readable. The line of men closed the ring, then paused. A headman moved to the front, silver threaded through the hair, long scars crossed one shoulder like dry riverbeds. A buffalo robe over one knee, a gaze carved from distance. Marin lowered the rifle butt to the porch floor. Hands open, palms visible. The ring did not tighten, not one horse moved closer than the edge of her garden bed. The leader looked past her at the chimney smoke, then at the door, then back to the woman on the step. Marin chose words without sharpness. This place holds a hurt rider. If you carry him home alive, the debt belongs to him. Not to me. The leader studied her face, a long heartbeat. Silence stretched. Marin kept breathing steady. Let the bright morning hold every outline clear, nothing hidden, no trap. The cellar board beneath the table creaked, once a soft reminder that choice waited in every direction. The leader sent 3 riders to the corners of the yard to watch others remained in their saddles, safety held yet tension mounted like heat in a pan. The sun rose brighter onto the porch. Maren reached for a bucket, filled it, took 2 steps to the trough, poured water slowly. Dust stuck to wet wood. The simple act made the scene human, not theater. The leader spoke at last, deeper voice roughened by years. "This ground not ours, this man ours. We wait till he speaks." Maren nodded. One careful movement. The ring settled in for the long stand. Horses shifted weight tails, whispered against flies. Dust lifted, then fell. A hawk sketched new circles high above the cabin. Taihan slept below, cool air easing fever. Maren leaned on the porch post, throat dry, eyes steady. The day opened into something larger than one woman and one rider and a posse with fast hands. It opened into consequence, the kind that tests bone more than nerve. She held the morning like a tool, ready to use, careful, honest, without show, willing to meet what came next. The ring held through a bright, clean morning. Horses breathed slow tails, swished eyes fixed on the porch. Maren stood with palms open above the rifle butt. A promise, not a threat. An elder who had watched in silence yesterday rode forward with calm that came from miles, not minutes. Scar lines crossed one shoulder like dry rivers. Raven hair braided with sun-bleached strands, a small shell at the throat. He gave a name for the first time, Tahada, then used hers with care the way a craftsman sets a plank before stepping Maren Vale. Keep watch when the rider below wakes, he chooses the road. No barter, no claim, only his word. Maren answered with a nod that cost something from the spine. Every nod in a valley like this changes the next 10 years. Tahada signaled. The ring widened to the fence line, then settled again like water after a thrown stone. Chores returned, dough pressed flat, kindling stacked trough-topped, each motion an anchor to keep the heart from drifting below the floor. Tahan slept, cool lamplight, unthreatening linen wraps changed without hurry, breath deeper. Now the tourniquet loosened to give color back to skin. When the eyes opened, they did not ask anything yet. They measured everything. Maren lifted a cup. Broth reached the mouth. The tin returned with both hands, a quiet courtesy. Older than any treaty speech followed in fragments, not begging, not apology, words like rocks across a river. The chase began near a windmill. A drover struck a boy, a knife flashed, then a rope flashed. Ugly voices carried the wrong story to the nearest badge. Tahan pulled 2 friends from a tangle of reins while shots cracked wild into sky. A drover fell to his own horse. The posse shouted murder and galloped at shadows until shadows bled. Maren let the account stand like a fence post. Planted, true truth would wear its own weight without her nails. She changed the wrap again with care that refused to wobble. Palm steadied muscle while cloth slid under the thigh. Gratitude sat in his gaze, plain, not slick, the old kind that chooses action later rather than speech now. Noon burned into copper. A hawk traced slow circles above the cottonwoods. Then dust rose on the south road. Small at first, then a brown curtain iron rang on stirrups. Leather snapped. 7 riders. Deputy Orton Pike at the front seat. Low like a man born to a saddle, hats down, bandanas up. They crossed the dry wash and fanned into the yard, a practiced bloom. Maren stepped to the rail rifle, angled low shoulders, squared tone. Calm, you ride rough on a homestead that never called for you. Pike slid closer, jaw like pliers, voice flat. We hunt a killer track, say he lay up near here. Maren kept the horizon level in her eyes. A man lies hurt under my floor. No one aims at him on my ground. Pike's boot tilted. The stirrup creaked. A young hand sneaked a glance toward the back window. Maren shifted, so the hat shadow fell inside her skirts, small geometry that saved a life. The deputy tapped a finger on the horn. Folks say you turned the trail with tricks, now stand aside, law walks where it must. Maren pointed her chin to the fence. Law rides the road. Not a woman's kitchen, go to the ridge if you need space to think. Pike spat dust to prove he still owned his mouth. Heads lifted along the fence. Tahada entered from the east gate. Quiet as heat hooves, placed soft as a cat. He halted between porch and posse, hands, open eyes, not words in careful English. The man you claim breathes not yours, not hers. His wait until his tongue chooses. Pike laughed, short, wrong county to lecture an officer, rifles twitched, no barrels. Rose tension pulled tight like rawhide wind, knocked a shutter once. A dry clap step sounded on the cellar ladder, then stopped. Weight moved through every rib in the yard. Maren angled a shoulder and breathed down through the plank hold. Weight, the plank grew still. Pike signaled a youth to slip toward the barn. Tejada leaned his mount half a length without touching a weapon. The move said enough. The boy froze, seconds stretched into a rope that could break or hold a shot, cracked from beyond the corral, not aimed, not owned a spark, kicked dust near to Tejada's horse. Animals jerked, men shouted, Maren dropped behind the woodpile. A shell slid into the chamber, quick and sure, not to kill, to keep borders. Another crack, ripped a sliver from the porch post. Wood spat a splinter across her knuckles, warm sting swallowed with grit. Pike barked. Hold fire dust turned the scene to chalk riders, pushed for angles. Tejada's hand cut the air hard. His people flowed to rock and mesquite, efficient as water. Finding the fast line, Maren glanced at the doorway. Tajon braced there, pale yet upright, one hand on the frame, the other on a broomstick, cut to walking length. No hero pose, only grit. The sight shoved courage into parts of her that thought they had none. A settler lunged for the porch rope coil, ready to throw over a wrist, not a neck. Maren rose in one clean motion, snapped a warning into dirt between his boots. No blood. Only a shout and stumble. The coil fell. Tajon crossed the gap in a limping rush. Thanks waste breath, so he spent none. Maren passed the rifle. He leaned a shoulder into the wall, kept the barrel down, a boundary, not a challenge. Pike cursed the fool who fired, then stared at Maren as if a new map had unfolded without his leave. You make this a war, Miss Vale. She kept voice steady. I make it a place where stupid ends ride that direction. If you still want to dawn tomorrow, Tejada's riders did not shoot. They cut space, pressed the posse's horses back 3 paces without touching leather, pressure made with presence. Not lead, panic leaked out of the worst rider when no shot followed. Breath eased in the herd. Pike measured the yard. Snapped 2 fingers, his line backed from the porch in grudging triangles. Dust opened a corridor between forces, a path for reason. If reason still lived, Maren stepped into that corridor, both hands open. The rifle lay inside behind Tajon's leg. She spoke low. The drover near San Miguel took a graze from his own friend. During a panic, I saw the tracks by the wash yesterday. 2 horses swerved, one cut itself, blood spots spread wide, not straight. That means no second shooter. Pike blinked once. Math spoken in dirt often speaks louder than paper. Tejada watched the deputy, not the woman weighing the man. The brim-dipped pride fought truth. The jaw flattened. He said, the search continues up valley. If I return and find shelter given to a wanted man, there will be rope. Maren stood still. The valley will remember which side chose rope over truth. Pike turned his horse slow so it would not look like retreat, then rode for the ridge without a word. The rest followed with that stiff look men wear when anger holds the reins. Dust-thinned sound fell to far hooves. Tejada dismounted, stepped onto the porch, old scars white against sun-browned skin. Maren did not move. Tajon watched through the doorway, a line of sweat along the jaw. Tejada placed a small carved bone on the rail, a token no settler would read yet. Gift was plain. This marks a watch kept without harm to your garden or your sleep. When the man below speaks, we carry him or we leave him according to his will. Maren said, this door stays open for choice, not for chains. Tejada lifted his chin. A soldier might call it approval. An elder would call it recognition. He returned to the horse. The ring shifted into shade, not a siege, a guardianship with edges. Afternoon stretched wind brought the scent of rain from the far ridge. No cloud reached them. Maren worked bread into round, set them by the stove. Tajon sat on the threshold to keep weight off the leg fingers, busy with a strip of rawhide braided in 3, not jewelry. A tether for new meaning. Small talk flowed without push. A mare once opened every gate on the line unless the latch hung a certain way, a river rock shaped like a coyote ear. Once told a rider where to turn in a storm. Smiles came unforced, one bright, one shy, no flirt, only respect, rising the way heat rises from a skillet. Long gold bands crossed the floorboards, a hummingbird paused at the window wings, a soft tremor that kept silence alive. Then a sound cut everything like a knife through stretched cloth. A single rifle from the north drawer, the bullet smacked a fence post, snapped it clean. The post toppled, the mare squealed. Maren grabbed the rifle. Tahon crawled to the corner to cover the yard from a low angle. Tisehada snapped a sign. Riders flowed to positions 2 left 1 right, not to strike, to reveal the fool who fired. Pike had not returned. This smelled like a neighbor drunk on rage or whiskey. The shooter raised his head at the wrong second, sun flashed on a buckle. Maren clipped the hat brim with a warning. The man cursed, split for the sage, ran crooked, not hurt, scared straight. Tisehada did not chase 2 fingers, rose riders let him go, a lesson without a grave. Dust settled, pulse eased. Tahon slid down the wall with a grin that stole years' courage. Without noise makes a stronger rope. Maren laughed once sharp, then softer laughter broke nothing it stitched. Twilight brought honey light that kept faces readable. A lamp glowed inside the door, remained wide so the watch could see her hands in clean air. Food crossed the threshold, a plate to the ring, a plate back, an exchange that tasted like the start of trust. Tahon ate slow strength, returning walks, not sprints. The leg throbbed hard enough to blur vision. Maren checked the wrap, no seep, no heat, good. The stick stayed under his palm. He swore to use it until bone trusted ground. Night came bright with stars. The yard avoided shadow coals in a small pit, burned to a low friendly heart. Tisehada's people sat stone still yet awake. Maren slept in the rocker with the rifle across her knees, not from fear, now from promise at first light. Before birds wrote lines in the air, Tahon moved to the porch and sat on the step. Pain lived in the jaw, but pride did not voice clear enough to carry. He called his choice ride with kin. Once the sun climbs a hand higher. Stay at the homestead until the leg holds, then meet them at Cedar Hill. Keep peace with the woman who refused to trade a life for safety. Take an open road, not a debt trail. Tisehada listened without blink, then bowed a fraction, not flourish a seal. The ring loosened, horses stretched, leather creaked. A day of waiting turned into a path forward. Pike would not love this truth, rode in with the next gust, yet the cabin now held a better order. Maren fetched the yoke for water. Tahon rose on the stick to follow as far as the fence, because standing at a well says more than any word. The story leaned toward a hinge, a mid-sun reckoning no one could dodge danger. Remained, choice had found a spine. The valley felt it like a held breath, just before the chest must exhale. Tahon tested the broomstick on the packed earth, breath measured, eyes clear, noon. Heat pressed flat on the yard. Tisehada waited by the fence, still as a cairn. Maren filled the trough and kept the porch between risk and the man who had chosen life. Then hooves braided into a single hard rhythm. Dust rose off the south road. The posse returned larger, now faces set like masks. Deputy Orton Pike ahead, pride bleeding under the brim. Neighbors strung behind rifles, low, the kind of low that turns sky to ash if a twitch goes wrong. Maren stepped into light, rifle at hip palms, open voice, even you already searched, Pike. The valley does not need another grave. The deputy answered with a jaw that hammered words into nails. Law needs closure, Miss Vale. Bring out the Apache or the knot. Close is here. Tisehada moved 1 horse length forward. Air uncut, English round and steady. Choice was given. Choice stands. Breath will not be traded for paper. Pike stared at the elder, then at Tahon in the doorway, then back at Maren. This is your last hour, he said. Weariness more than heat. He lifted a hand. The line began to spread for a push. Maren's throat tightened, then steadied. She carried the rifle to Tahon and set the weight into his palm like a smith passing a hammer. Tahon checked the chamber lever down, lever up, shoulder set, barrel low until need arrived. A shutter slapped the wall. The mare tossed ahead. A neighbor flinched. A muzzle snapped up. 1 wild shot punched dust 3 strides from Tisehada's horse. Not a wound, yet enough to knock patience off its stool. Sound cracked across the yard like a dry branch. Men jerked, animals danced. Maren dropped to the cordwood and worked cartridges smooth and fast. Tejon slid the bad leg behind the jam, brought sights no higher than the fence, and stitched a warning into the split rail. Near the most reckless rider, Splinter's hopped message landed a line drawn with powder. The rush started because crowds move like weather. The worst thought wins first. Pike cursed for hold fire, wind blew the order sideways. Two neighbors loosed glare-blind shots. A young rider in Sehada's watch took a crease across the arm, fell behind the trough, angry but breathing. The elder cut the ring into 3 wedges with one hand. Each wedge flowed like water to flank and shadow, pushing space rather than flesh. Maren spotted a market-day acquaintance jerk a rope from his saddle. He hurled it toward the porch, not at a neck, at a wrist. The loop whirled bright. Tejon snapped a shot through the coil, the rope dropped. Plan undone, the man stumbled on his spur and sat blinking at the sky. The door to sanity cracked open. Maren used it. She rose and called Pike. Look at the ground. Not at your temper, Prince. Show your lead horse lost nerve. Before your men did. You aimed low. You came to scare, not to hang. Walk away with that truth in your pocket. Pike met the stare. Something inside unclenched a notch enough for sense to breathe. He hauled the reins and barked. Hold a second, neighbor tried to steal the pause for glory. Fired at the eaves, the slug chewed. Cedar skipped near Tejon's boot. The Apache moved on instinct, lever worked, aim set for a hat brim. The crown jumped and rolled. The shooter grabbed for it. Fell on his tail, pride bruised, not flesh. Shots fell to shouts, then to panting, then to the hiss of dust. The tide turned, not by blood, by boundaries. Pike looked at a crease across his sleeve, thread pulled loose as if the coat sighed. He swore once to nobody, then pointed at the ridge back out. We are done for today. A few obeyed, the rest followed in a slanting retreat. Shame makes a poor horseman, dust swallowed them. The valley exhaled silence, rushed in loud as a river. Maren lowered the rifle weight, running from spine to knees. She sat by the well back on cottonwood bark, forearms stinging from a shallow graze. Tejon eased down, chest heaving, then steady, 2 people breathing the same heat, with language cooling after fire. Sehada crossed the yard, boots quiet, studied broken rails, scattered shells, clear water still in the trough. Then looked at the woman who had turned strangers into a line that no longer advanced. You stood where the earth needed a post, he said. Maren let a tremor out and let it settle. Maybe I just got tired of dust-swallowing folks. Sehada nodded. The kind that closes a chapter and opens the next. Pike will bring paper. He said words that wound sleep longer than bullets. Maren glanced toward a room already smaller than dawn. A place can be home and still be a cage when enough eyes decide it. So Tejon reached for her hand, slow, deliberate, callous to scar. Not theater, only knowledge that 2 spines lean better than 1 few words. English kept short, a promise carries lighter that way. I ride with kin tomorrow when sun stands here. He pointed with his chin to a plank shadow. The trail to Cedar Hill passes your well, then Cottonwoods, then the Red Bluff trouble nests in 2. Draws ride with us for that distance. The valley will read your choice. Rumor will not chase at night. Maren weighed the map, then faced the elder. He measured like a carpenter checking a beam for load. Not beauty come through the first pass with us, woman of the trough. Then choose the next road at bright noon. No bargain, only step where you wish. She rose, legs unsteady will firm. The cabin clicked through like cards, flour on a table. Laughter gone, a rope swing long since cut, a door barred too many nights, a key suddenly light enough to leave. She set that key on the porch rail. Not ceremony, only a mark that walls are wood. Not fate, linen bound the grays tighter. What mattered went into a sack kettle. Knife thread, a small Bible carried for the pressed sprig of prairie sage inside. Tejon rose stick under one hand, rifle over the other. Cloud shadow slid across his shoulders. The watch opened a gate that needed no hinges. They set out under a sky polished white by noon. Fences fell behind, rhythm turned to travel. Not flight hooves drummed a steady beat. Dust lifted and settled, grass leaned. Then stood a long, bright frame that could hold for minutes because the breeze kept sowing motion at the edges. Coyotes watched, then vanished. Larks rose, then dipped. The homestead shrank to a brown square. Then memory Maren let eyes skim the roof line once more, then faced forward. Cedar Hill weighted bones of red stone stacked like books. The trail wound through juniper and pinon resin scented the air. Tejan kept a measured pace, the bad leg complaining less with each mile. Tejada ranged ahead, then fell back, passing signals with fingers and low whistles. No one pretended the world lacked teeth. They simply refused to feed them at the Red Bluff. Two armed men tried to nose around a spur rock, quiet curiosity more than courage. Maren lifted an open palm. Clear message, we see you pass along, no quarrel today. Numbers red and barrels level. The pair drifted off. Pride cannot drink without a crowd. The pass narrowed. Cottonwood stitched a green seam. Water talked under stone. They halted there because movement without pause turns into running, not travel. A small cookfire smoked sweet and thin a meal, not a war flame. Maren rinsed dust from face and the shallow cut, good sting that returns a body to itself. Tejan stepped down without the stick. For the first time since morning, tested weight found the leg willing. The broom handle leaned unused. A quick smile flickered out. He drew from his pouch the raw hide he had braided 3 strands tight. He tied it around Maren's wrist with a knot, meant to hold when wet, added a small bone bead quiet mark that says this person lives under my watch while breath stays in me. Maren answered with a brass compass from her father, lid dulled by years, needle honest, not for north exactly, for reminding a heart that the world does not end at a fence line. He turned it once, watched the needle settle, slid it onto a thong at his belt. The watch said nothing because some exchanges need no witness. They change the air by themselves. When the sun stood straight over the pass, Tejada spoke. Choice stands here, woman of the trough, ride with us toward the long mesas, or take the creek road to the next county. No song follows either way. Maren drew the kind of breath that empties a chest of borrowed fear. Looked at the blue ridge beyond Cedar Hill, then at the creek road full of rumor and paper, and faces already sharpened for judgment. Palm rested on Tejan's shoulder, heat from muscle, truth from bone. I ride to the mesas for a while. Peace needs distance to grow roots. When those roots hold, I will return, settle the bill for cabin and fence. I owe no rope and no one owes me chains. Tejada inclined his head, a sliver of acknowledgement. The line loosened. Not a guard, now only companions under the same light. West opened wide. The road climbed between towers of red stone. Wind wrote thin white lines along the ledges. A kestrel hung, then dropped like a thought, then rose again, a tiny victory that brought a grin. Maren did not know she wore by mid-afternoon. They reached a shelf of open ground view spilling for miles, sage-like sea river cuts flashing silver here for rest. The elder said, a body that chooses deserves a good breath. Camp grew plain and tidy, saddles in a row, blankets over rope. Maren leaned on warm rock hair, loose for the first time in months. Tejan sat near, rifle beside him, more habit than need. They ate Johnny cake and soft jerked meat. Relief did not talk. It hummed. The elder showed landmarks with a tilt of chin that ridge like a sleeping horse, that spire like a candle. The long mesas like a table for old stories. Maren mapped each line into memory. Late sun poured over the shelf, turning stone to copper, faces to honey. The ending stayed bright, readable, gentle. No mud, no bruise. Tejan planted the stick upright as a token not needed. Now kept for luck. Breeze teased the rawhide at Maren's wrist. The bone bead tapped once against skin, settled her palm, covered it, and the meaning it carried. His gaze held steady. Loyal, quiet, the kind of look that lasts longer than vows shouted too loud. Tejada sat apart with patience of water through stone, letting the young carry tomorrow. Maren thought of the key left on the rail of pike, lowering his hand at the last second, of neighbors who can shrink or widen. Depending on the story they wear, she felt tired, clear, unbroken. The valley behind would talk. Talk dries out on long roads. The trail ahead would test yet hard ground under honest feet. Injures less than soft ground overlies, day held to the edge as promised, final bright frame, horses shifting weight, kettle steaming, sky-washed blue Tejon. Turned the compass once, needle steady, they sat shoulder to shoulder, not rescuer and rescued, not settler and Apache, simply two people who walked through powder and rumor and found a line worth keeping quiet, simple true. The West teaches stern arithmetic. Mercy plus courage equals survival minus cruelty never means weakness. It means strength that refuses theater borders made by open palms, sometimes hold better than boards and wire. Strangers can carry each other without owning each other. And that is a vow daylight understands. If this story felt true to you, stay by our campfire, new rides each week. Subscribe to the Wild Frontier Tales. Ring the bell and journey where gunsmoke fades but memories never do. Every story rides straight into your heart.